Welcome everyone. My name is Sean, and today we gotta revisit Baltimore's public school system because we've talked about in the past how they have 23 schools where no student tested proficient in math, the absolute embarrassment of that. But now the Baltimore public school top officials have decided that they're going to respond to that by removing those test scores and that data from public view, because if you can't see that they're failing these kids in Baltimore schools, then you can't complain about it. I'm not joking about this. It's an entire scandal. It involves encrypted text messages and all sorts of other nonsense, and we're going to get into that throughout the course of this video. But before we get into that, I just want to say thank you to everybody who signed up on actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
And thank you to the podcast listeners, Spotify, Apple, and Google's podcasting platform. So on this channel, I've recommended Fox Baltimore's series Project Baltimore so many times, it's gonna make my head spin if I recommend it again. And they actually put out a 9-minute segment on this whole situation. It will be linked in the description, and I highly recommend you check it out because they go through the timeline that I'm going to talk to you about with their fantastic local reporting team. And they also have a written companion, which will also be linked in the description, which I will be using primarily to discuss this topic.
The Maryland State Department of Education has released the 2022 state test results, known as MCAP, Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program. Baltimore City's math scores were the lowest in the state. Just 7% of 3rd through 8th graders tested proficient in math. That means 93% could not do math at grade level. But that's not all we found. Project Baltimore combed through scores at all 150 city schools where the state math test was given. We found in 23 Baltimore city schools, there were 0 students who tested proficient in math.
So as I said before, Fox Baltimore broke the story that 23 Baltimore public schools had 0 students proficient in math. And by the way, there were additional number of schools that also had only 1 student proficient in math, which is objectively an insane failure, especially when you factor in that Baltimore public schools are top 3 in funding across the nation, and all of that money appears to be stolen. And they actually used a data set that was available on their website that is pictured right here. And here, as you can see, it's highlighted the numbers that indicate the testing and all of that, and eventually that leads to the results.
Among the list of 23 schools, here's how the numbers break down. 10 of them are high schools, 8 are elementary schools, 3 are middle high schools, and 2 are elementary middle schools. Exactly 2,000 students in total took the state math test at these schools, and not one could do math.
Now, obviously, it's incredibly embarrassing that the 3rd most funded public school system in the entire country is doing this poorly with the tax dollars that they have access to. So, what they decided to do at Baltimore Public Schools was not fix the issue, was not address the problems in their education, was not go after the teachers' unions, or anything like that. What they decided to do was hide information from the public. And as you could see in these comparison sheets, that's exactly what they did. They just removed the data so you could no longer look at it, so you can't do original reporting on it, because the biggest problem for these left-wing agitators is you acknowledging that there's a problem. If they can eradicate the evidence of a problem, that's better than solving it, because honestly, the whole point of the public education system is to enrich the people in charge of the public education system, not actually educate your children. I'm irate. Sean Kennedy from the Maryland Public Policy Institute said, "The data is utterly useless. They made it useless and they did it on purpose." Kennedy was simply stunned that the Maryland State Department of Education recently did this. Quote, "Instead of coming clean and saying that they failed the students of Baltimore City and students across the state, they're trying to hide it. And they're now piling lies on why they're hiding it," Kennedy told Project Baltimore. Now, the timeline of this is as follows. In January of this year, Maryland Public Schools uploaded spreadsheets of how their schools were performing onto a website for public view. Project Baltimore downloaded this immediately, and it's a good thing that they did, because shortly after that, they decided that they were going to pull down the data so the public couldn't see how bad they were failing their public schools. Now, to give you an idea of how fearful and cowardly the Maryland State Department of Education is, they didn't even wait for the full Project Baltimore report, which, by the way, we covered on this channel, to come out before they pulled down the data. They actually pulled it down after Project Baltimore's Facebook page posted about the failing schools, the 23 that had absolutely no students proficient according to their standardized tests. They took it down, but the segment still ran because, again, they downloaded it over at Fox 45. Now, as Project Baltimore pointed out, there are specific schools that were referenced in their reporting and additional schools that have been completely removed from the dataset. Now, they actually put an asterisk over the key numbers so you can actually read this data. And the reason that the state of Maryland is saying that they're doing that is due to privacy reasons. Because you see, if they have a certain low percentage of the student population that is actually participating in these tests, they actually hide it because it's easy for you to figure out where these kids go to school and figure out which kids are failing the test. It's actually not that hard to find. And by the way, the original data sheets that we showed actually accounted for this, but according to Maryland state law, the numbers that were on the original spreadsheets were valid. They were not considered too small for you to be able to publish out into the public, so this should not be subject to a privacy violation. And that's the thing. The reason why they're hiding this has nothing to do with the privacy of the students, and it has everything to do with the terrible job that Baltimore City Public Schools are doing. When we look at the original sheet, what you'll notice is that there are two numbers on the right side of this chart, and those two numbers are under the category of level 1 and level 2. These are the lowest categories for mathematics proficiency that you can have in Baltimore, meaning that if you're in these categories, you are not proficient, you're failing, and you're worse as the number gets lower. And one need only look at these records, understanding that context, to know how bad it actually is. So at Collington Square Elementary / Middle School, 78.9% of third graders are in the worst category of Baltimore math, but that level 2 category is also failing, and that's where the remainder of the students are. It gets worse when you move on to grade 4, where 88.9% of students are in the worst possible category below not being proficient, and 11% are in the second worst, also failing category. Gets a little better when you get to mathematics grade 5, where it's 69.6% in level 1, again, the lowest category, compared to 30.4% in level 2, but this all adds up to 100% of the students in the school failing math proficiency.
Mr. Chaudhary, can we ask you a couple questions about your department removing test scores from the website?
Look, this is a cover-up. Plain and simple, we understand the rationale for the cover-up. It has nothing to do with privacy, and this is even more scandalous than those horrific numbers in Baltimore City Public Schools.
Mr. Superintendent, have you ever used the Signal application and commission of your job?
I have no comment. Thank you much. Appreciate it. For my job?
Well, most recently, State Superintendent Mohammed Chaudhary denied using an encrypted messaging app for his job, but Project Baltimore obtained screenshots showing he used the Signal app to communicate with high-level employees at the Maryland State Department of Education.
Because public officials in the Maryland State Education Board feel so entitled to your taxpayer dollars without any accountability that they think they can do this and not answer questions about this and discuss how they're running your children's education through private encrypted text messaging apps, which, by the way, were also a component of this scandal.
Mohammed Chaudhary earns $310,000 as the Maryland State Superintendent of Schools, and he's currently fighting for his job.
And by the way, I am not joking about the huge dollar amounts that are being paid to these mega failures in the Baltimore and Maryland public education system. The superintendent of schools makes $310,000. He's a guy called Mohammed Chaudhary, and guess what? He's the one at the center of the alleged Signal encrypted app texting controversy where he's governing the public schools in complete and utter secrecy, despite the fact that he's supposed to be transparent, he's supposed to be a public servant, and again, he's pulling in $310,000 while running this position in complete and utter secrecy.
A city schools police officer and star football coach facing federal charges.
You want to say something to your players, Coach?
Accused of racking up more than $200,000 in fraudulent overtime. And the district didn't catch it?
The answer is the answer. We know that they put things in place.
And by the way, they're not just hiding results. They're not just overpaying people to communicate with high-level employees through encrypted text messaging apps. They're also not good stewards of your money. There's also a scandal where the football coach / security guard at one of their schools is under federal indictment because he billed the school for $210,000 allegedly of fraudulent overtime. And when I say allegedly, I mean the evidence is pretty damn strong because he's claiming that he's working overtime at a Baltimore public school while there's video of him fishing on a boat, which, by the way, is not in the parking lot of that Baltimore public school.
Dr. Sonia Santelises last year earned $445,000 in total compensation as the CEO of Baltimore City Public Schools.
And by the way, to wrap this up with a bow on it, the CEO of Baltimore Public Schools, Dr. Sanja Santeles, I don't know if I'm mispronouncing her name, made $445,000 in total compensation last year. So these people are racking in huge dollar amounts. They're not catching obvious instances of overtime fraud that you think you would be able to notice, where the guy is clearly not even present. Again, pulling in $210,000 in overtime in a year brings up no suspicion at all whatsoever. They're hiding test results. They're talking through encrypted apps. There's no transparency. And when you find out any information about the students failing, about the corruption, they close their mouths. They cut you off. They don't talk to the public. They try to use security to escort reporters out, because that is the rot in Baltimore public schools. Absolutely shameful that they're making these high dollar amounts, spending this much per pupil, and the results are what we're getting from Baltimore public schools. And I will remind you, we did another segment not too long ago about one principal in an area of Maryland that's actually poorer than Baltimore City. They have less money, less resources. It's an area ravaged by opioid addiction. And because that guy was motivated to actually help out the students, to get his teachers to connect with the students, to raise standards, not try and hide standards, they score above the state average despite being more disadvantaged than the Baltimore City public school system. So you can fight back against this, you can get positive change, but the thing is, these people are all about their own personal benefit, their own personal gratification, and avoiding accountability at all costs. And all costs is a lot of money from the taxpayer into their corrupt pockets. So yeah, it's disgusting. It is scandalous. The entire Baltimore public school system being a failure is a scandal on its own, but the fact that they can cover this up, the fact that they're just robbing you blind is insane. It's asinine, and honestly, more people should be under federal indictment. But hey, those are just my thoughts, so let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the absolute nonsense going on in Baltimore. Till next time.